Again, it is a big agenda this time, unlike the last bit of the meeting. So again, be concise, please. Contributions from the public are welcome, but I'm going to do the same double act with Steve Jones this time as we did last time. So he's going to facilitate the questions and carry around the mic. I think it was really effective last time. And again, let's be respectful of one another, please. So approval of previous minutes. My formatting has gone a bit wrong, as you see. I think they were largely okay, except on the final page, the person who was to make sure that from our point of view, the workshops were fairly attended and there was fair representation from all geographical districts and residents' associations as well. We didn't name that person. I'm prepared to be that person, unless anybody else wants to be that person. No? Okay, so we'll just put my name in. I guess I should do the update before we vote for the chair, but I haven't had any. I haven't had anybody say they want to be chair and stand against me. So, but it seems a bit daft for my update to come after the vote. So I'll give you the update now. Okay, so. So, in our last meeting, it was a bit disappointing actually from our point of view, the last executive board meeting. Grenville proposed our resolution 2, by which we asked for work on option 3A to stop until feasibility studies for rapid mass transit were conducted, and also that we didn't consider 3A to be a suitable alignment necessarily for rapid mass transit, given its proximities to rural communities, the amount of infrastructure required to keep our communities safe, and the impact on sensitive green belt areas. And we asked that consideration was given instead to developing a more suitable alignment. And unfortunately, the response we got was this could be characterised as the LLF wanting to block work for a period of time, further evidence of tell the world to go away for a period of 6 months, a year, whatever. And I wasn't given any opportunity to refute that claim at that meeting, so I do want to refute it now because I think that's actually grossly unfair. And you could argue that when the representatives of 50,000 or so people are consistently saying that they have major issues with a scheme you want to implement, but you press ahead regardless, it doesn't sound like the representatives of those people that are telling the world to go away. But everybody around this table wants to travel to and around our city efficiently, but we've consistently opposed particularly the off-road busway scheme, because, and our resolutions have consistently said this, that it doesn't provide enough benefit for enough people for the major financial and environmental cost. It's consistently poorly evidenced. And we still have no idea how the buses will travel around the city centre once they reach there, once they reach Grange Road. And without that piece of information, you really cannot make assertions about journey time, punctuality and reliability, with any credibility actually. And then added to that, the scheme is ferociously expensive. It's got a BCR not much more than 0 and a predicted modal shift of 1%. Plus, we do not want a park and ride site that will add to congestion and known bottlenecks and on environmentally sensitive high ground. And we have, as a group, consistently said that. But that doesn't mean to say that we're blocking everything and we're putting our head in the sand. Not at all. When we asked GCP to pause the project, it was for very good reasons. That we should wait for the results of the rapid mass transit and light rail studies that are currently being undertaken, and we'll report by the end of the year. The initial findings will be by the end of the year. That doesn't seem that long. And our arguments were that continued work on option 3A could well prove wasteful, and running a consultation in November will be expensive, and with only one part of the puzzle available for comment will not necessarily be ultimately useful. So we believe that the Mayor's wider vision, or other wider vision projects, might give the communities west of Cambridge what they want. That is, a complete vision of rapid, effective public transport that stretches right across the city and serves existing communities as well as new ones, and provides good value for money with minimal environmental damage and the potential for high modal shift. And our resolution was asking, isn't that possibility worth waiting a few months for? Actually, Rod's resolution 1 will look at how something along those lines might work. So, you know, it is a positive contribution. The second response from the Executive Board resolution was that there is a difference between the route and the mode, and we must future-proof the route for what goes on it, and what goes on it may change over time. We must not delay the transport routes in discussion of modes that might go on them. This was in response to our assertion that not all types of rapid mass transit are suitable for any alignment, and so we're better knowing the potential mode before we set the alignment. So as our resolution made clear, we do not agree that it's reasonable to set alignments before the mode of transport is decided. A 120-mile-an-hour bullet bus will require major infrastructure, which has huge implications for the nearby communities and the Green Belt. Given future-proof modes are actively being discussed at the moment and look to be a reasonable likelihood, it is reasonable that our communities are made aware of the potential impacts. It's also reasonable that in the assessments of the Green Belt, etc., and there was one particularly notable one in the 49 documents that were published last week, it's not just the mode with the least impact that should be considered. We should be looking at, it feels like the GCP are having their cake and eating it here. If there are benefits to the future proofing and they're being used to justify the scheme, we also need to know what the worst possible impacts are. So it's not about blocking, and I think it's unfair to say it's about blocking. It's about pushing GCP to better explain their intentions and ultimately develop something we think is better. So that's my update. I'm going to hand over to Bridget now, who is going to conduct the chair.
Right. So every 3 meetings, it's required that we take nominations for a new chair, and similarly for the vice chair. So I was up for re-election last time. I'm very pleased to still be here. So are there any nominations for the poison chalice that is the chair of the A428 LLF?
I would happily propose Helen Bradbury.
I was going to propose Helen as well.
Right, all those in favour of Helen? Thank you, very good decision, everybody. Back to you.
Thank you. Okay, find my agenda. The next item on the agenda is, I think, Ashley, do you want to make a response to previous resolutions?
Well, they are, I mean, quite dry, to be honest, just written out a long series of paragraphs.
Come up front and do. I just say that the speakers have all very kindly agreed to limit their presentations to only 10 minutes, and they've said I can interrupt them at 15 and stop them. After each presentation, there'll be about 5 minutes for questions from the floor, more if we really need it.
I don't really want to detain people too long because obviously there's a number of resolutions and they'll need to be brought up, and below that there's a sort of quite dry sort of lot of text. There's sort of a lot of text below them, and I just wondered if that's really the most useful thing for you to sort of listen to me droning on for 10 minutes really reading out text on the screen. I mean, the option is that obviously we can provide that by email to Helen, you know, this evening or tomorrow morning, and it can be published on the relevant website. I mean, that might be a more useful exercise.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay. Because then you can spend the time more usefully, perhaps. Okay. Thanks.
Okay, I'm going to hand over to Colin Young of Atkins Consultancy, who's going to give an overview of proposed route alignments.
Just wait to get a PowerPoint up. I'm going to try and be brief. I'm going to just present the findings from the end of phase, or end of stage report that's just been uploaded. So a lot of you might have downloaded it and had a read. But it's just a brief overview of our findings in that report. Got to be mindful that when we're going through this report as well, that this is a point along this whole process at which we've gathered information and we're reporting that information. There is further assessment to go beyond this stage, but this is where we're at the moment. So, which is what I've said. In this, I'm just going to talk about the options and assessment and the specific route alignment. So, thank you, Kate. We all know the existing issues. It's the amount of traffic that is heading into Cambridge in the AM peak period, and it's not going to go away. I think the data is showing that the queuing is just going to get worse in 2031. And could be all the way back to, the modelling is showing could be all the way back to Manley Mulch by 2031 and beyond. Next slide.
It already is.
This just presents the costs. Like I say, all this information is in the end of the phase report, and there has been some commentary about what's the difference between the costs that were presented in the SOBC and the costs we presented here. The differences at the right-hand side. So the SOBC considered land acquisition, operational cost, maintenance, and criteria like that, whereas these costs presented are high-level construction costs of each of these options. This is a summary of CSRM information which shows bus and park and ride patronage on an annual basis for each of the options as presented in the end of phase. And the bottom row presents the bus scheme only, so it shows the amount of people that are likely to use the buses just for the scheme and buses with the park and ride use too for each of these options considered. This just replicates the mode share, and that was included in the report too. We'll just move on. Journey times, as presented in the end of phase report, presented these in two for the Cambourne to Grange Road and for the phase one, so it's the Manley Mulch roundabout to Grange Road for each of the options. All that information is in the end of phase report. These haven't come out too well, but these diagrams were in that end of phase report, just showing the specific route alignments of each of the options. This is option one, which is the inbound bus lane, the solid line showing where the bus lane is, the dashed line being on road, and as you can see it's intermittent as it comes in east of the M11. Option 3A, which is the next one, shows the considered alignments that we've taken through the assessment in the last 10 months. And then option 6 shows the inbound and outbound tidal lane, which goes between Manley Mulch roundabout and High Cross, and then the services are on road beyond that. There's a lot of text here, but it's just pulled out the pros and cons of each of the options from a transport point of view. These can be seen in the report. The next one. As part of this assessment, we did an MCAF, which you're all aware of. We did was partly done with the LLF technical group. We did an initial MCAF assessment as part of the option 6 work, and we went on to do a high-level MCAF assessment, which considered more criteria, web tag compliant criteria, and these were the current scores, but we concluded that there was probably, the criteria was still, we think there's further criteria that's needed to further assist in providing evidence for the options considered, and that's part of an ongoing assessment. Just to touch on the environmental impact of each of the options, most of us know what these are, option 1 and option 6 being on-road. We do lose some vegetation, some trees down Madley Road as part of those options, and option 3A is obvious visual impact going across the countryside. And the next one. So the next steps of this report is obviously continued communication with yourselves, the LLF, and ongoing development of option 6. Public consultation, which on the basis of set out in the end-stage report, and further refinement and assessment of the options and specific route alignment, including more detailed environmental and transport assessment. The recommendations for consultation based on this report is shown on this image, which is within the information submitted, which includes the 2 park and ride sites and the alignments coming down from Madley Mulch to Grange Road. So, as far as consultation is concerned, it's likely to be in November, December, subject to the Executive Board decision. Proposed meeting with a working group from the LLF to discuss the consultation that we made. The LLF, prior to the consultation, outlined the details and chance of feedback, and then the consultation outcomes to be published early in 2018, with further reporting to the GCB board in summer 2018. Potential consultation on phase 2 is proposed for late 2018. So, thank you. Take some questions. It's under 10 minutes.
Yes. 7 minutes, very good. Great. Anybody on the board want to ask questions? Tim?
Thank you. I noticed, well, I sort of raised my eyebrows actually, when you were saying for Route 3A there'd be biodiversity improvements. Bearing in mind it goes through arable land which harbours certain species, I can't quite see how sticking a lump of concrete or tarmac through the middle will give improvements. I welcome your answer.
What a busway gives you is, versus arable land, is it gives you an increased chance to put planting down the middle between the 2 concrete strips. It gives you increased biodiversity down the sides and the verges. And there's some areas where you can actually include planting alongside, so it does increase biodiversity over arable land.
Thank you. So we're down to 2 park and ride site options at the moment. Now, I mean, my sort of gut feeling is that since we rejected we've rejected Crowley, that the odds are that we're also going to reject the Madingley Water Tower site, so that will leave us with Scotland Farm. Now, when previously we've discussed the possibility of an alignment north of the A428, that's been rejected for any number of reasons, but might the selection of Scotland Farm as the preferred option for the park and ride site mean that you will look again at northerly alignments?
Should we just take a couple if you want to, or you can answer one way, I suppose.
Just the current scope of the decision made last October was that the catchment area was south of the A428, and there are good reasons for that in terms of connecting Cambourne with Cambridge, and really in terms of the fastest, most reliable route. Now the view that we take is that both of those park and ride sites can work with a on or off-road alignment within the existing catchment area, and that's the basis of our assumption moving forward. So there's no, from the point of view of officers, there's no intention to recommend looking at new alignments north of the A428.
Thanks. If we just keep any park and ride questions, what we do now, it'll go to, yeah, okay, fine. 30 miles.
I just had a clarification question. You mentioned visual impact, but if you build a busway, and I think we had in the workshop the calculation of 15 to 30 buses per hour down that busway, you need to not just assess the impact of the construction, but also the use of that motorway and its impact on the natural environment, on the people who live in the area. So it's ludicrous just to call it visual impact, when of course there's going to be pollution, of course there's going to be impact from these buses. So not to calculate that and to ignore the overall environmental impact, and indicates to me that you've been given a brief to justify option 3A. Thank you very much.
I think what goes to the heart here, and then I'd like you to answer my question and not answer the question, is misleading the public. Now, I'm very serious about this, because when this scheme was announced about 2 weeks ago, you went out in the press stating that it did not cross the Westfields. I can tell you now, you look at those alignments, that is a total lie. I'm prepared to say that. I'm not worried about defamation. That is a lie. Those routes cross the Westfields. I said on the record, I want to know why you lied to the papers about that. Second question on biodiversity. We sent you a report by James Cadbury, who was head of the RSPB, who specifically said that roads across sensitive areas like the Bin Brook, and I am angry actually because it's outrageous what your consultant just said, actually have a horrendous effect on animals. Animals try and cross these roads, they get crushed. It makes, anyone who knows anything about biodiversity means it affects their breeding patterns. If you're going to come out at a consultation with this stuff and lie to the public, we need to know why you are allowed to lie to the public.
Two questions on biodiversity and one other question from Steve.
In terms of crossing the Westfields, I've always been very clear that all of those routes cross the Westfields, so I'm not aware of anyone saying anything to the contrary. That's always been very clear. The Westfields is crossed by the lines on the 3. In terms of biodiversity, one of the things about, we talked about arable land earlier on, the value of native species, hedges and trees is much greater than that of open arable fields, as I'm sure you'll be aware. And one of the difficulties over the last 30 to 40 years in the agricultural environment is the loss of hedges and trees. So an increase in that increases biodiversity. In any event, measuring the environmental impacts for the scheme of this magnitude would have to be produced as part of an environmental statement. And as you know from the information we've put out, we've done the initial desktop surveys, and we've talked about the walkover surveys, for example, for ecology. And next year, as things move forward towards defining the scheme, they would increase. So I'm not going to talk about lying. I can assure you there's no lies. It does cross the Westfields.
Sorry, I need a right to reply to this, because this is fundamental. I need a 2 minute right to reply. I'm sorry, but you know, your press release on the day, because it was circulated to me, said this was just before the march, so it was designed to reduce the impact of the march. You said these alignments do not impact the Westfields. It's in the press release. I'm sorry, mate, you might not have said it, but I think actually maybe Francis said it, or the head of PR at the GCP. You cannot mislead the public like that. It is not right.
Okay,
it's quite clear from the plan that anybody who knows the LDA work on the Westfields, that those lines on that plan, the pinky purple line and the blue line, do cross the Westfields. They do.
Do we have a question?
oh, yeah, we'll just come in, but just finish with the plan first.
Release Smarter Cambridge Transport. There was a survey, telephone survey of 1,000 people who were asked whether they might use the busway. Now, that figure of 35% indicated willingness to use a new park and ride facility on a corridor. It's a very selective fact, because the reality is that when you calculate how many people anticipate commuting by the busway, it actually works out as 10.5%. Now, the 2011 census indicates that 11.3% of people in this corridor commuted by bus. So therefore, there's actually a negative modal shift indicated by that survey. It is not supportive in any way of the very, very optimistic modal shares that we were shown in the pie charts, particularly for commuting, but for all types of travel. My response to that, please.
I think the point about the figures is that, as you say, the 11%, we could get back down all night talking about numbers, but what the numbers are showing generally is that the use of busways as segregated routes over that of the general use of buses in the UK is higher. So busways have a higher patronage figures than general bus use in the UK, possibly the exception of London, and that figure's going down, and that's really the key point to take from that.
Could I, as a member of Parliament, just ask one question about the costs figures that you put up? Why did you choose to have construction-only costs, when option 3 obviously has a large amount of cost elements in purchasing land and other things? So if you could do a full cost comparison, option 3 would be very much more expensive than option 1 and option 6. Why did you selectively choose the most favourable cost estimate for this report?
The figures are clear that option 3A is significantly more expensive than the other two options. So there's no intent to hide that fact. The point of providing cost, at this stage of the process, the costs are high level estimates. So in terms of what the ultimate scheme costs, will be further refinement. They've been refined from the earlier costs that were provided back in October 2016. The key consideration about land costs are that once we start to provide specific route alignments, we begin to then talk about specific impacts on individual land parcels, and the consideration from us as the technical project team is that could be prejudicial to publish estimated land costs at this stage of the process, because that may impact a future discussion with landowners on those points.
That's a fair point, but I think had you published an estimated land cost, you'd have probably found the order of magnitude, which instead of 4 times bigger, was probably 10 times bigger. As it was in the previous costs you published.
It's not 10 times. It's also relevant to say that there are land impacts with other options, and the actual relative impacts can be quite high, because remember the cost of agricultural land, for example, is lower than the cost of, for example, impacting on residential property, and then you have potential impacts of blight as well. If you're going to make, as a result of changing people's accesses to their houses so in a way that could potentially blight the property in total. So there's a range of land impacts which need to be looked at in more detail.
So based on the previous Cambridgeshire Guiding Busway, to give you a flavour of what that cost was, that's about 10% of the overall cost, probably lower actually, 8.
Thank you very much. So I've used my position already. Any other one here? Well, should we go to the floor first? Yeah. Robin, you have a question there. Thank you.
There are members of the panel who are sitting actually in the audience, so keep your mouth behind.
Will any members of the panel who are sitting in the audience bring a chair up front? Otherwise, you'll be treated as a member of the audience. Put your hand up.
I personally prefer to see the slides than to see the audience. Robin Palloon, Cambridge PPF. I would like a question for Mr. Baker of Atkins. Can he reassure us that on strict engineering and construction grounds, there is no impediment, there's no reason why a tidal busway cannot be constructed alongside the existing A1303 carriageway?
We've got one name and one company. They're probably both wrong, are they?
take it from the question you're saying that are there any reasons why option 6 can't be built? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, technical, engineering, feasibility reasons why it cannot be done.
Why it cannot be done?
Yes. Are there any?
No, there's no showstoppers. I mean, the indicative, the indicative design.
That's what we wanted to know.
Yeah, so the indicative design that we've come up with shows that it can be accommodated with bridge widening at junction 13, with land take of people's properties along Manderley Road. You know, so it can be accommodated in engineering terms. Yes.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Colin.
So my question just relates to the amount of disruption to the existing Manderley Road traffic will be affected by the various options. It would seem to me that options 1 and 6 would cause absolute mayhem in that road, and then would have spillovers into the other arteries into Cambridge. And from my perspective, Cambridge is a global city. We should be looking to the future. We should be looking ambitiously. And for me, for all those reasons, suggest that 3A is the way to go. It's better for the long term, and it's going to cause much less disruption to the existing route traffic in and out of Cambridge. The other routes will cause mayhem for several years.
Could you your name for the account?
My name is Professor Steve Jackson, and just back to the biodiversity issue as well, I totally agree with the gentleman over there.
Any other comments from the...
Hello, Carol Carpen, a resident of Coaching. Some things just don't stack up for me, maybe I just don't understand. But why are we all supposed to go to Grange Road? Do we have a very fast, super fast bus to get us to Grange Road, then we cross the road and take a punt?
Just thinking of the point about traffic during construction on the on-road option, when we looked at the possibility of doing the work on the road down Manderley Road, we got a bit of early contractor involvement from Balfour Pt, and Balfour Pt indicated that clearly the more infrastructure you were trying to put in the existing road, the longer the traffic management and the delays accordingly. And we're all sort of familiar around here with the sort of delays we're getting for a new alignment to the A14, so that's an indication of that. In terms of the question about Grange Road, the County Council's Highway Authority will bring forward measures on street on the existing highway to complement bus priority or bus or rapid transit, whichever it be, depending on the route. Clearly, you get into the city centre, the historic core, it becomes more and more difficult to provide bus priority. One of the reports on the webpage does start the debate about what kind of measures could be used, and clearly they need to be considered in the round with the work that colleagues are doing in the city access, and that's part of the big conversation which is going on now about the sort of measures that people generally want to see. To give you an example of how it was tackled previously, back in the day we had what was the core scheme, and that was part of the Cambridge busway measures that were brought forward at the same time. So the two can be brought together.
Thank you, Adrian. Anybody else who hasn't spoken yet to me? And we'll come to you guys quickly. But I think we have to wrap up quite soon.
Thank you. I'm looking at your end of stage report, paragraph 3.2.1.1. You talk about, you state that option 3 is still feasible to achieve the aims of the scheme, even though the GCP board has said you should look at option 3A. And at the same time, you are saying that it is difficult to fully assess the cost of option 3 and 3A until various aspects of the scheme and what their impacts have been decided. i.e. on development, the dwelling of the A428. So aren't you kind of being contradictory there? That's the first question. The second one is, the catchment area of this route, you have consistently, and to me, very annoyingly, omitted Caldecott in your analysis. I have pointed this out not once, not twice. And in your report here, even you want the report to the executive board, I mean, you've put the catchment, your appendix 2, the catchment of the routes as Cambourne, Bourne, Hardwick, West Cambridge. Why are you blindingly ignoring Caldecott? This, for me, goes back to your modelling that I mentioned earlier on. If as consultants, you're saying that you think by 2031, the queues on the A1303 will be backing up to Manly Mode when it is already there, how valid is your modelling?
In terms of your question about 338, so where we are with that is that the scheme is being assessed on the basis of 3A in line with the instruction given last October. Once 3A was proved as, if you like, as a feasible option, not necessarily more feasible than option 3, but as feasible, that was the instruction. But what's also clear in the report is in terms of, if you like, taking forward a recommendation for what we call phase 2 of the scheme, we're not yet in a position to do that. In order to do that, we need to complete the business case, and you're saying to bring in some external considerations which are currently not fully known. And we've listed those out in the report. They involve issues around, for example, Bourne Airfield and West Cambourne, and future plans for the A428 west of Caxton, Gibbet, etc. So there's a number of factors which prevent us making a definitive view. So formally the position is that option 3 and 3A are both still, if you like, on the table, west of Long Road, and no, at this stage, specific alignments being recommended one way or the other, but for the purpose of assessment, we are taking the figures that Colin produced are about option 3A. In terms of your point about Caldecott, I have to say I don't fully understand why you feel Caldecott's being ignored. The modelling, the demand assumptions will bring in Caldecott in terms of access to a busway or any other service. And
the documentation does not mention Caldecott. Anyway, there is a figure 1.2 in the end of stage report that has Blue Dots, right, and Moore, and Harvey, and the Clerk, and it has Caldecott standing up in the transparent blur, as if it doesn't exist. That is the only point where I've seen you actually include
it does exist. We're aware it does exist, and in fact, part of the consideration of Caldecott is also linked to future master planning at Bourne, which, as we may do, is not known to us yet, because
it's not dependent on Bourne.
no, in terms of the,
right? We have people who use the bus.
I understand. Just one point there. But absolutely, but one of the considerations is, should there be a development at Bourne, would there be 1 or 2 stops, and a stop to the far east of a future Bourne development could serve Caldecott?
I just want to wrap that up, but I just want to say I do welcome the line in the report there that said you'd be looking for input from the LLF in the at the time of the consultation. So we're hoping that we'll have input into the papers and we can talk to you about that. But what I would like to point of clarification is on the enhanced MCAF. Disappointingly, hugely disappointingly for us, we don't feel we had any input into that at all. The previous one, the MCAF, we disagreed. We spent many hours together agreeing the criteria, but then you went off and scored it without reference to us. So we objected to that from the last round of meetings. So then we have an enhanced MCAF, whereby about 10 new categories have been added, which all appear to measure punctuality and reliability. And we're hugely disappointed that we had no input into that. So I know that the documents do repeatedly say we did, but we didn't actually.
So a couple more questions and we'll have to wrap it up. So let's quickly, if you could, please.
Thank you. My question is about, in your assessment, when you're assessing option 1, you talk about there being, one of the cons being no advantages, no improvements to cycle facilities along Antony Road. My concern is that actually option 1 would lead to not just no improvements but considerable problems for maintaining the current cycle infrastructure along Antony Road. That doesn't appear to be clear in your documents. Can you confirm whether what you mean is no improvements or whether option 1 would actually lead to a less good cycle network along Antony Road?
If you hold that one, I'll get to last 2 questions and we'll take them together.
Sorry, this goes back to the point about disinformation. This is absolutely central because your consultation is coming up. In the Cambridge News on the 1st of September, it said the following. The JCB said the latest proposals take on board criticism of earlier designs to build a cross-countryside outside Cambridge known as the Westfields and would instead go around the fields. How do you reconcile what your PR department is doing, pulling the wool over the public? No, this is very serious actually, because actually in the City of London and places like that, if you say wrong, if you mislead the public, people have gone to jail for that in the city. So don't think this is minor, because I have got proof here in writing that you misled people when you made the announcement, and you basically misled the public.
Thank you. If you could just answer the question on the cycling.
Yeah, with respect to option 1, Madeline Road, it was interesting, we had a chat with one of the Storys Way residents earlier, and the cycle facilities along Madeline Road at present aren't great. What option 1 does is it provides a bus lane, but it's not going to improve cycling along there. It's probably either going to re-provide what's there, or it will be less than what's there at present. So
it might be worse.
Yes. But,
and we have to think about Eddington as well. Nobody consults with the Eddington inhabitants who aren't yet there. Okay, fine.
Yeah. So, could I just chip in that quite some time ago, the board agreed to run an off-road cycleway, which went from West Cambourne all the way into Cambridge City, probably running in part along the Carpen footpath. So there's already a commitment. I think it's probably going to be in the next tranche of funding. There is a commitment from the board. There will be an off-road cycleway.
That doesn't help Eddington residents.
No, but that's already a commitment there. That there will, and the issue being that when we're talking about cycling, there's kind of 2 types of cyclists. There's the commuter cyclist, and then there's a recreational cyclist. And in order to make it safe for all of them, it's best that it's segregated from the roads. I know it's not. I'm just saying they have agreed that.
Very quickly. So, yes, just on the cycling point, so there's the Compton Greenway scheme, which has got an interdependency with this scheme as well, so the 2 sit hand in hand, particularly where the 2 come together near potentially on those alignments, the 3A near Grange Road, there's a potential conflict or benefit there of the 2 of them. In respect to Stephen's point, I can only refer him to the answer I've given. If he's got a difficulty with the press release, it's a matter to take up with the PR team. I'll raise that with them and ask them to contact you to talk about that point. But I would reaffirm, so there is no doubt, that in terms of the LDA description of what the Westfield was, section 12 in their report, section 3 in our report, it's the Westfields, it's part of the green belt.
Thank you, Adrian.
I think we need to wrap that up now. Can we move on to item 4, which is overview of the proposed park and ride sites? And this is Joe Baker, not McDonald.
Thanks, Helen. Hopefully Katie's getting these slides up. So the same applies. We'll try and run very quickly through a few headline points. a fairly detailed report was submitted as Appendix M on the papers on the website, and people can obviously get full details there. So we'll just give a very quick run through. Can I have the first slide, please, Nathan? So we'll try and is a very quick run through of the approach of the study. As people remember, there have been presentations to previous LLF meetings and also the last two workshops. It was a two-stage study. The CTO board asked us to go back to first principles and look at a wide range of options in order to see if there were other opportunities out there. At the starting point of the study, we looked at 9 different options, including expansion of the existing Madingley Road site. The first stage of the study, after a workshop with a number of people in the room, refined those options down to a short list of 4, which included Cromley and the waterworks site at Madingley Marsh, also Golden Airfield and Scotland Farm, and then also the existing Madingley Road site. The second stage of this work, and again we did a subsequent workshop in this room only a few weeks ago before we finalised that, helped us refine down to a short list of 2 options, being Scotland Farm and Waterworks site at Madingley Marsh. And this piece of work has been undertaken in the last 4 or so months in parallel to the work on the bus corridor options. As was raised earlier, the 2 schemes are clearly very closely intertwined, but there's no ultimate interdependency between the 2. Next slide, please. So, very quickly, if people aren't aware, most people will be very aware of the sites. Those are the 5 sites we've looked at. There are in the report more detailed layouts. They are still very much indicative at this stage. They're there to give us an idea of the potential layouts of the sites, and as we've said on other aspects of the study, more detailed work would be needed to refine these as they move forward. Thanks. So very, very quickly, results, a similar type of appraisal process to the NCAF, slightly different approach, but broadly speaking, both are compliant with the DFT's WebTab approach to scheme appraisal. Again, based on those criteria refined following the outcomes of the first workshop and with a number of helpful contributions from LLF members which have given us guidance towards some of the key issues. The results came out actually with Scotland Farm as the highest ranking output. The next jointly being Bourne Airfield and Madingley Marsh Waterworks site. We have taken from that the decision really to take forward Scotland Farm and the Waterworks site. Bourne Airfield, as people are aware, there is a range of issues around some of the planning constraints that may come into play, and also traffic issues. I'll just run through the 4 sites very briefly, just to give a bit of background to them. So, very quick summary of the 4 sites. Scotland Farm, as people are aware, has less visual impact on the wider countryside, but we need to be mindful it still is in close proximity to a smaller number of houses. It is also in the green belt as well, although it is to the edge of the green belt and partially bounded by existing development. It's less well connected to the proposed offline busway, but better connects itself to the A428 for traffic. Waterworks is better in traffic terms, like to be more heavily used, close to the centre, so better opportunity for park and cycle. It is very much in the green belt. We are aware of the landscape and visual impacts which have been discussed in some length, but overall it performs better than Cromley in that regard. Again, the site is already developed in places with some existing visual impact, for example, the radio masts and street lighting, but again, we are aware of the location aspect of the site. Next slide, please. Bourne Airfield, less desirable than Scotland Farm. I think the real key issue, as well as some of the planning issues around what's happening at the airfield, is the light pressure and certainly its road. As we know, the site is off-road. If it was taken in isolation, it might be viable. With the additional proposed residential development, it's likely that there will be too much traffic for the junction routes to cope with both the parking line and the generated traffic. Cromley, as I said, scored less well on the waterworks site, larger effect on the landscape and visual impact, and much closer proximity to the SSSI, which again we have discussed in some detail. Also, again, as colleagues here have raised previously, it's located to the east of Madingley Marsh roundabout, and while there are some traffic management arrangements to mitigate the impact of that, clearly it's more complex and provides less relief to the 303. Next slide, please. So I don't particularly want to go through these in great detail, but there were some concerns raised at the last workshop that we didn't provide feedback from the workshops. Just to confirm, from the first workshop, we picked out a number of key themes and some of the issues relating to those. Those then fed into the proposal for the next stage of the work, and also for future stages of the work be taken into consideration and ensure that those key issues are criteria. The next slide, which I don't expect to look at in any great detail, if we could move on. What we've done from the second workshop, and don't worry about reading that now, it is included fully in Appendix M, is we've documented all the comments that were raised about all of the schemes from the second workshop. We've provided some initial commentary on those, so those have been put in there. There are quite a few issues that aren't necessarily relevant to the site selection, but if a preferred site moves forward, there are very relevant concerns and issues to be raised. Those are now documented, and we will make sure that as we move forward, any points raised will be taken into consideration at the appropriate time. So just to allay concerns that every comment raised at that workshop has been noted for future reference. So thanks, that's all I want to say now, and happy to take questions.
Thanks, Joe. Any questions from the panel?
Thank you. Just a quickie. To what extent were the bus operators consulted with in the work that you've done?
I managed to get a couple of questions left here. Chris? Tim?
Yeah, mine's a question about the Madingley Mulch site. I just wondered, you mentioned with Crowley the proximity of the SSSI of Madingley Wood. Bearing in mind the Madingley Mulch site is a couple of 100 metres to one side, surely there's exactly the same influence of the SSSI, it's just a couple of 100 metres to one side.
Tim Stewart?
On a related point, what guarantees do we have that the waterworks site won't morph into becoming Cromley when the detailed design is done?
Anybody else? Any panel in the audience? Okay. Oh, Des?
Just a query about the assessment as well, and that is patterns of what drivers will do in relation to the two sites that are currently on the table. So you've got Scotland Farm and you've got the waterworks site. How much have you done or will you do in terms of what people will be prepared to do in terms of the driving? Who will go to the Scotland Farm? Who will not go because it's a Scotland Farm? Who would go to the waterworks site? Who wouldn't go to the Scotland Farm? These will be decisions that people will make dependent upon where the park and ride is, and it isn't. I don't seem to see that in any of the assessments you've done so far.
Thank you. I'll come.
Thanks. So on the first one, on the bus operators have been consulted, they've been involved in both workshops. They've made some very clear points, for example, the last workshop, that they had a strong preference for park and ride sites located closer into the city centre. I think there was a suggestion at the last workshop that the case was the other way around, and there was a very clear contradiction of that from Stagecoach. So I think their position has been quite clear, that they are supportive, but they would prefer a site further in. And that indeed is one of the reasons why, whilst we're aware of concerns regarding Madingley Marsh sites, that's a strong argument in their favour, and one of the reasons why they've been very much kept on the table is that in the desire to reflect the views of the bus operators.
Is that because it's cheaper for them to run buses shorter distances?
It's quicker as well as cheaper. Clearly it is cheaper, but it is also quicker. So for example, you use fewer buses, you're consuming less diesel, if the buses are indeed diesel powered, which they may not be. So it's generally advantageous that it's a shorter distance. You want to maintain, for example, a reliable service with equal headway. So it is more convenient in many different ways.
Forgive my cynicism, it sounds like it's actually all about profit margins. It's about protecting their profit margins. It's more expensive for them to run buses elsewhere. So I'm sure you know that. So I just feel it's something we can keep on being mindful of. Our job is to produce running buses that are what people want, not just what the bus operators want. And we should protect their profits.
I just want to ask if, because it seems incredible to me to put a park and ride at Madingley Marsh, not purely, obviously partly because of the environmental considerations, but also because of it's located after congestion starts. We know it queues on the A428 coming off that slip road. So I just want to ask you if there's any evidence about driver behaviour, because if I were in a car on the A428 coming in and I had to queue 10 to 15 minutes to get to the park and ride, you wouldn't find me going into the park and ride and queuing again to get on a bus and stay in my car.
Okay, I suggest we add that one to Desmond's question, your fourth question. Let's try not to interrupt now so that Joe doesn't lose his train of thought.
Yes, I'm trying to go through the questions in turn. Yeah, that relates to the fourth question, I think. So the point about the AAA site, the waterworks site is around 400 metres off the top of my head away from the AAA site. Cromley is significantly closer. So clearly, we are acutely aware that the AAA site is there. Whatever environmental assessments are done downstream at different stages will very much focus on that. The AAA site, as you know, has a high level of protection, and so it will be a determinant in decision-making downstream, but it is a significantly further different distance away, so that is a material difference. That clearly ecologists will in due course look at exactly what their implications will be. In terms of waterworks morphing into Cromley, I think the answer is no, very clearly. If the site is defined as waterworks, then a planning application will go in for the waterworks. That is a different location. You can't then suddenly decide to build a park and ride on Cromley as well. And actually, if you brought the two together, it would be about the biggest park and ride site in the country. It's just not going to end up that big. So the two are distinct sites. There's no subterfuge, I think, in that regard. On the fourth, in terms of driver patterns, there has been some assessment done so far on the modelling side of the interactions of the park and rides. One of the things we need to be aware of is that depending on different bus options, there will be different patterns of behaviour on the park and rides. There will need to be more work in terms of precisely who from which direction uses them. There's not an absolutely fundamental difference. Helen is right to say that as congestion mounts, there is a risk that the park and ride site becomes beyond congestion. That said, at the moment, the Madingley Marsh roundabout is a fairly simple design roundabout. There are plenty of opportunities to make that roundabout operate more effectively in the future. So, for example, zero control of the junction and various other things. So, if that was needed to be the case, that as has been the case in many, many roundabouts up and down the country, would be one of the ways of making it more efficient in order for traffic to get through. But we're not quite at that place yet, and clearly as the scheme moves forward, we'll have to look at the junctions in much greater detail.
Questions from the floor?
Hello, my name is Mrs. Baxter. I live on St Neots Road in Harwick. Has any consideration been taken, if you do Cromley or the waterworks, how traffic from Bourne, Caldicott, the increased traffic and building that's going on in Harwick as well as what's already going to be increased in Cambourne, they won't necessarily use the 428. They will use the old road, the 1303. They will then come down St Neots Road, the 1303, to access the particular park and rides. So not only will St Neots Road between Cambourne and Harwick have increased traffic flow of cars going to the park and ride, we're also supposedly getting a bus, train, or whatever along there as well. So anybody along there is never going to be able to get out to get to work themselves. And why choose a park and ride that end of St Neots Road when if you have one at Bourne or even Caldicott, or not Caldicott but Cambourne, everybody coming from St Neots, Manchester, don't all have to be driving to a bottleneck and then getting on a bus to get to somewhere where you then have to get onto another bus, so you're paying for park and ride,
Alistair Burford, Cambourne resident. When Cromley first came about, it was probably 3 times the size as you've got it on that map. Within the marking, one of the criteria is that the park and ride site should be future-proof. Where do you see the water tower expanding to?
Okay, 2 questions there for you, John.
Okay, pick up the first question about the St Neots Road. You're absolutely right to ask questions about traffic on St Neots Road. I don't think the park and ride is the main determinant in that. As you know, are aware, there's a lot of proposed housing development. That is a separate issue which will be, again, needed to be subject of planning application. And the traffic impacts on the St Neots Road associated with that development will be a very valid point to be raised there. It is likely, I would imagine, that there will be commitments made around traffic management mechanisms to control levels of traffic on the road, but that will be dealt with by the local planning authority. And so I think the park and ride choice is probably the least of the issues compared to the overall level of new housing. But it's a perfect valid question to be asking. In terms of why the park and ride wouldn't be further out, this comes back to the issue about bus operating costs. It's very important to note bus operating is not always the most lucrative business, and it may well be sometimes that buses need to be subsidised. So it may actually be a case of minimising the subsidies needed to maintain a decent bus service, for example, perhaps in evenings or Sundays. It's not necessarily a case that there's a huge profit margin coming out of this. It's about making sure that there is a good quality service maintained for the people using it. So that's the reason why. The issue is, as you know, is once you get further in, then the congestion mounts up, so you need to, there's nowhere for you to park once you hit the centre, and it's getting more congested. So I don't think that particularly is an issue. In an ideal world, if there was no financial leverage, you might want to.
We need to wrap this up quite soon because it's 100%.
So it's Alistair Burford, main recall from our conversation in November last year, when we talked about Trumpington Park and Ride being a sort of similar model in terms of size. That park and ride is 9 hectares, and all the outlines you've seen up there are 9 hectares, so it's consistent with what we talked about last year.
No, I'm talking about expansion, and the fact that you marked Scotland Farm down because it couldn't expand, and your criteria, and yet the water tower is gain marks because it could expand. The question was, why can't Scotland Farm expand, and where do you intend to expand the...
Well, it depends. It depends, as you know, at the moment we're talking about 2,000 spaces or thereabout, so it depends on the sort of capacity you see to expand. Both sites, to some degree, have got the potential to expand.
So why would the market?
I'll let Joe talk about that.
So potentially it can expand. The appraisal consists of lots of criteria. We're acutely aware of the environmental concerns about the waterworks. There is room in which it could expand, but at that point would need to be subject to environmental scrutiny. We're aware of the...
Why is it a different mark between that and the Scotland Farm?
The site there is unconstrained. Scotland Farm, you've got the housing to the north, you've got development to the west. But as I say, I think it's a fairly minor point in the appraisal. The allowance we put in there is for about 2,000 car parks. I think the point to make is the amount we put in there. It's one of the questions DFT expects us to respond to. The reality is there's ample space. I think in terms of waterworks, it is unlikely that it would need to expand beyond the areas.
One last point.
Resident Hardwick Parish Council. In your document, you say that it would be 11 hectares, which is 22 acres, and expanding. That isn't what you just said. You said 9 hectares. And expanding.
Trumpington Park and Ride is approximately 9 hectares, and that was the basis we took. In terms of the larger area that was indicated previously took on board the requirement for mitigation, ecological mitigation. So there's the area for the actual infrastructure, the car park, and then around that, to screen that, and within it is the need for planting trees and other things. So it's 2,000 spaces with 9 hectares of actual park and ride, additional land required for as part of the design of the ecological mitigation.
Thank you very much. Okay, Helen, over to you.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we ought to be able to rattle through these resolutions, well, I'm hoping so. I'm going to start with Rod. I need to plug myself in there. Rod is going to give, you remember earlier, I noted we were criticised for not having a positive vision, and Rod is going to present a positive vision. I just want to reassure Stuart that the black line is supposed to be in the cutting of the A48. So bear that in mind.
Chair, I think Resolution 1, the genesis of Resolution 1 comes about as a result of, we're at an important crossroads in terms of this overall process, particularly because the Greater Cambridge Partnership will take an important decision in terms of more detailed developments of particular routes at the next board meeting. And I think that although we are a very large group with various different interests, I think it's fair to say that certainly my experience at the LLF is that we do have an overriding objective, which is to provide, we believe that actually that this area does deserve high quality, sustainable public transport, which is integrated with a broader transport strategy for the area, not just Cambridge City, but the surrounding area, that is something that the residents will be able to use and will benefit from. So this resolution seeks to address that, and what it does, it doesn't do it in the context of the Greater Cambridge Partnership. It actually does it in the context of the Peterborough and Cambridgeshire Combined Authority, because actually the mayor, the Combined Authority mayor, as we've heard from the previous meeting we had where he presented, does have a vision for major strategic intervention in relation to public transport within our area, and any action undertaken by the Greater Cambridge Partnership needs to be in that broader context. So what I'm saying here is that I believe that what this LLF seeks to achieve is that goal, to basically deliver that transport solution west of Cambridge as part of that strategic context. And then what I've gone on to say is that what I think we're seeking is short-term interventions that buys time for us to address those longer-term interventions and see whether or not they're viable. And so the short-term interventions that I'm proposing is that we go forward with a community proposal, which is option 6, which is a tidal, as described by the officers, a tidal bus lane down Manningley Rise to High Cross, and then on-road bus movements from High Cross along Manningley Road with smart traffic intervention, given the number of traffic lights between High Cross and Northampton Street, and then also, in addition, clearly the introduction of a new park and ride. And that will be linked with other short-term interventions which the Greater Cambridge Partnership are already exploring, such as on-street parking restrictions within the city itself. And what that does, it buys us time. It buys us time to do an assessment of the introduction of light rail from St Neots that the Mayor is very committed to. It buys us time to look at the Girton interchange, which I believe is fundamental to solving the solution of congestion to the west of the city. And what that also does is it enables us to look on a bigger picture basis of how you connect the West to the rest of the city and so forth. And so what this proposition seeks to do, this resolution, is that it seeks to be a voice for the LLF to reconfirm to the Executive Board that we're not blocking progress in relation to finding a solution, but we believe we want to do it in a way that is smart, where public funds are spent efficiently, and that actually where the longer term strategy is the one we should be focusing on. So that's a summary basically of what this resolution seeks to achieve.
Thank you, Rod. Any points of clarification or from the audience or comments? Or from the panel?
Yes.
Robin.
Robin, Blue, Cambridge, BPL. And in principle, I think we support what you're trying to do here, Rod, in terms of this resolution. But it's very long, it's rather muddled. I'm not convinced that the first paragraph is appropriate for a resolution, and I think it's much better handled through the chair. The second half of it is really the requirement to differentiate between short and long-term interventions. And I think that could be made much clearer as being the main theme, the main issue which the resolution wishes to address is that the Greater Cambridge Partnerships Board should be differentiating when it comes to spending their money on whether these measures which they are discussing and approving are to be short-term requirements or long-term ones. And I think that it could be made clearer, but that was what you were seeking to do.
Thank you, Robin.
Unfortunately, I won't be able to support this resolution, really, because I don't think the short-term measures being proposed are appropriate and their impact is actually too great for a short-term measure. Both the option 6 and the new Carpen right side. Our own proposal is that we should build travel hubs at Cambourne and between Highcoast, and Hardwick, and that we should use inbound flow control to regulate the flow and give buses priority on the A1303. That, I believe, will be quicker to deliver, lower impact, and will provide that short-term advantage, while we absolutely agree that these long-term measures need to be looked at, and a mixture of the Gurn interchange and possibly light rail or something in the longer term.
So, Rod, bear in mind what Edward's just said. Is there any way that you can accommodate what Edward said are his sort of red lights to this? Because I do think there's an argument for the LLF doing more than just saying no to things. You know, if we've got to keep on working with the Greater Cambridge Partnership in a positive way, you know, they're currently, I think, perceiving us in quite a negative light, and perceiving us just as a sort of protest group. And, you know, we've got to somehow move forward to a more sort of collaborative relationship with them. So I'm just wondering if you can accommodate into your resolution what Edward said, and so perhaps we could take this forward in a more sort of well accepted way by everybody here.
To avoid drafting by large committees. Yeah. I take both points. I think both.
I mean, the first point can be dealt with just by starting with, in the second paragraph, the LLF rejects the claim, and then starting it there.
I accept this point in terms that we need to be seen as collaborative, but the counter to that is that actually the Greater Cambridge Partnership needs to be seen to be collaborative with the community. We are representatives of the community. Now, we are a very large mix of that community, and we don't necessarily have, on individual matters, all have been aligned historically. But I believe in general there is a philosophy that we have that everybody can support, And actually, I'm all for being very cooperative, I tend to try to be, but actually the tone and nature of the Greater Cambridge Partnership really disturbs me. I was at the last board meeting, and it really disturbs me because they are alienating themselves continually from the public, and we are representatives of the public. I think on the two points, what I'd like to suggest, Chair, is perhaps what we could do. I understand the points taken, and I'd seek to incorporate them. Perhaps if we could try and do that outside the meeting and with those parties, I'm very happy to try and incorporate it and make it look more, structured. And I take Edward's points. I think they're valid. I haven't incorporated all short-term actions, for example, that could be taken. So I'm very open to that.
Can we just agree the principle that the board should be differentiating between long and short-term interventions, and then at this meeting, and then we can go and draft it outside the meeting. But I do think we should do.
There is one danger here, though, is that I actually don't think all road is necessarily a short-term solution. I mean, the fact is, what Rod is saying, which is very smart, is he's saying, the mayor's looking at underground, he's looking at light rail. Let's not go and trash the countryside like 2 years before we come up with these other schemes, which is the essence of what is being said. On the issue of us as a protest group, I mean, I'm not going to read it out, but again, Chris Tunstall made quotes misleading people about the Westfields issues. We've also been misled on many things. I think when Rod talks about the tone, I think that actually, reflecting on that board meeting, which I obviously witnessed, accusing local people of fake news when you officers know that the terminus on Silver Street was discussed, because we've got the documents, so we know you knew about it. You're laughing because you know it's true. Admit it. You knew. All right, you put your hand up. Thank you. Someone said, I respect, Adrian, I respect your honesty. Thank you. So the tone is wrong, and therefore we have to protest. We have no choice.
Helen,
I would like us to agree the principle and vote on a principle. I mean, we seem to agree the second part of it. We are unsure what our shorter-term intervention should be. But I think the bulk of it, what we're really saying is, let's just do something for the 5 to 10 year period while we're thinking of something better. And if we can agree that principle, then I think we should do that. Shall we move that? Okay. So we have to agree.
I'm sorry.
Hello, I am representing Gulfway. If we actually appear to be antagonistic, it is because we are very tired of putting forward our opinion that the green fields and the green belt should be preserved for future generations. We are here with a very grave responsibility, and we have to preserve its integrity, not by cutting it here and adding there, but completely. That is our position. Gulfway has had a discussion. We have distributed questionnaires with a very good response, which is statistically significant, and all of us are in favor of protecting the green belt.
Thank you very much, Helen.
Okay, can we vote then to agree in principle that the board should be differentiating between short and longer term measures, with longer term measures centring on Girton? Can we vote on that? Good. Brendan, resolution 2.
Chair, just before I move to the resolution itself, there are a number of comments I'd like to make,
particularly in relation to comments that Colin and Joe made a little earlier. And that's specifically in relation to traffic movements and destinations of transport. On at least 3 separate occasions last week, which was of course the first week back to school for many of our schools, traffic wishing to access the A1303 from the eastbound A428 found itself queuing well before the slip road to that A1303. On one occasion the queue started near the Blue Bridge in Hardwick, and on Friday, way back beyond Hardwick, between Bourne Bridge and the Hardwick Junction itself, following the closure of the slip road owing to an accident on the bridge crossing the A428. Travel time from the start of the queues to the Madingley roundabout, from which a passenger vehicle access to the park and ride site is proposed, was varied but considerable. The advice given by police to drivers wishing to join the southbound M11 was to use the old A428 St Neots Road. The queues stretched the entire length of St Neots Road, bumper to bumper, and placed cars, vans, heavy commercial vehicles and buses in close proximity to cyclists already using the narrow on-road cycle route. St Neots Road is not suitable for this volume of traffic, and yet it would inevitably become the automatic rat run to avoid queuing for the A1303 slip road, the Madingley roundabout, and consequently the entrance to the park and ride site. We need to collect peak hour video evidence of the slip road queues, as my discussions about such congestion has in some quarters met with incredulity. So my appeal is to the audience: if you do have video evidence or are able to collect it, please do, and please let me have it. We need to demonstrate that the more suitable location for a park and ride site is located further to the west and is prior to the start of the traffic queues, has full access to easterly travel as well as city centre and southern destinations. It causes less environmental damage, has less impact upon communities, and is future-proof. From the outset, we have sought transit routes which travel directly to the destinations to which our passengers wish to go. Many do not wish to go to the city centre. They would like direct, speedy and reliable public transport to the biomedical campus, the area around the Science Park, to Cambridge North Station and to Cambridge Airport and Marshall's businesses. In other words, to their places of employment. But there is no access from the Waterworks site to the A428 for travel in an easterly direction, nor can you join the northbound M11 to connect with the easterly A14. So far from being future-proof, this site will be unable to fulfil this important criteria. And for that reason, Chairman, I propose Resolution 2, that we welcome the removal of Cromley as a potential site for a park and ride. Madingley Hill is not a suitable location for it, for all the reasons that are stated, and we therefore object to the Waterworks site now being included in the short list of potential locations.
Thank you.
Any comments? Panel?
Again. Sorry, being a nuisance. I strongly support this, but I think that there's a risk that if we say object to the waterworks, that they're going to resurrect yet another site on Madingley Hill. So I think that the final sentence should be something along the lines: we therefore recommend that all sites on Madingley Hill adjacent to the Madingley Marsh roundabout should be dropped.
I'm quite happy with that. So can we look at amendment?
Just write that. Yeah, okay. Let's, shall we vote on the amendment? Anybody against? No? And then vote on the resolution. Nobody against. Thank you. Resolution 3. Marcus.
Yes, those who've followed the discussion long enough will know that my very first intervention before the City Deal Board in May 2015 included this point. And we had one of the residents say earlier that they don't understand where the buses go, especially if we take officers seriously, and there could be a bus every 2 minutes, so 30 buses an hour, going down West Road and then into Queen's Road. We don't fully understand where those buses should go from Grange Road, so therefore I think there needs to be an urgent clarification, and also is a question of integrated thinking, right? So to say, oh, that's for the city access study, and there's a different team of consultants that will deal with the city access study, but we will just press ahead with this busway where it may fall, and then worry about where the buses go afterwards later, is waste of public money and really costing a lot of time for all people involved. They're real physical, unless you want to remove some of the historic buildings in Silver Street, there are real physical limitations as to how many buses you can send down Silver Street into the city centre. And therefore, we need this clarification. Why do you choose Grange Road when the real destination, at least what the officers tell us, has to be the middle of the city? And we as an LLF have taken huge issue with that. The officers basically turned us down, and now we should ask that clarification from the City Deal Board. And I apologize if I have to be provocative and then leave, but the school has started and I'm needed at home.
Thanks, Marcus. Any comments, questions from the audience? Oh, photograph yourself then?
I do. Splendid, I can see myself. Antony, Carpen. The reason why actually I support this resolution also it raises issues with Queen's Road, as well as simply the number of tourist buses that are also coming into that part of Cambridge as well at the same time. And one of my big concerns, as someone who is constantly on inhalers these days, is the impact that this is going to have on air pollution, in particular, that Cambridge is not doing particularly well on it. So, again, when it comes to the clarification, I'd be very interested to hear what impact this is going to have on air pollution. Thank you.
Are you suggesting we add that into, or just as a comment? Yeah?
Just a comment.
Fine, thank you. Okay, Helen?
Okay, should we vote on this one? Anybody got any objections with the wording? Additions? Robin? Okay, let's vote on this one. 19-0 again. 20. Oh, somebody's popped up. Okay, good. I'm going to hand over to Gabriel now. You've got a few slides, Gabriel. This is about